Okay, looks like we are live. What's up, everybody? Jacques Crafford here. I'm so excited about tonight. I've got lots of awesome news and also a really cool tutorial that I'm going to share with you. I've been meaning to do one of these for the longest time. So before I just share a bunch of news, I'm just going to say what you can expect for this live session tonight. What I will be doing is I will be sharing some really cool news that's happening in the camera world, the camera universe, the alpha universe. And then also I'll be talking about shooting in S-Log. The reason I'm so passionate about this is because a lot of people are intimidated by it. I've tried it for many years and I didn't really know what I was doing. So eventually I went to the point where I didn't shoot S-Log. And because of that, I felt like in some kind of projects I missed out because I was so intimidated by it, where I could have gotten better results. And having learned a few things, and with the new camera technology and stuff that's coming out, it's actually becoming so easy. So I'm going to share that workflow and process with you just to show you how easy it is. But before I carry on, I've got some exciting news that I want to share with you guys. But first of all, I want to talk about the Alpha Universe. If you're watching this, there's a good chance that you have been to the Alpha Universe site. You probably had to register for this event. But I think a lot of people miss out on the fact that you can actually watch a lot of content even if you haven't seen it live. So this is a good example. Like this workshop, it's live, but it's going to be live afterwards. So you can watch it afterwards. It's going to live on the Alpha Universe. It's going to live on the YouTube channel. So if you've missed some of the events, the webinars, the pre-recorded sessions, make sure you go check it out on the Alpha Universe. Go to the past events. If it's not there, go check it out on the YouTube channel. There's so much content. There's a wealth of content of educational stuff that from all our ambassadors. It's really our ambassadors. It's so amazing. Our team is growing, and we've got a lot of new members joining us, and it's so awesome. Everyone offering a unique look at how they shoot and their own genre. So there's something for everyone. So definitely go check the Alpha Universe. Tell your friends about it. Also, we want to establish a community. So this is something that's going to grow more in the future. So we want you to participate. We want you to leave a comment on the YouTube page. Go to the Sony A7SIII Instagram account and come and engage with us. Go to my account, kind of leave me a comment. I want to know if you learned something. I want to know if you have a question. Sometimes we'll talk about that now. We're going to do a Q&A also. Sometimes people are scared of asking questions because it's live, and if you're one of those people and you have a question, come afterwards. Come ask me afterwards. I would love to. We want to build a community of learning, and the Alpha Universe is the place where we're going to do it. Okay, so next up, look at the slide here. Very exciting stuff. If you are in South Africa, well, you can be anywhere in the world, but the South African launch for the Sony A7S Mark III and A7SIII, the brand new camera that just got announced yesterday, this is happening tomorrow night. Okay, on the Alpha Universe, you have to register, so please go check it out. There's a link, Alpha Universe A7S III event. Go and register. It is gonna be insane. The amount of effort that we put into this event, it's super educational. So we will do live Q&A. But also we had some really cool demos, and it's about more than just one guy shooting with the A7S. We have a bunch of ambassadors on board. So some of our new ambassadors, it's going to be so cool, guys. Like, we put in a lot of effort. We made a production, like a nice production with the camera, and we'll be talking about how we made it and features, and obviously the Q&A is going to be awesome at the end. So don't miss this. It's on the Alpha Universe website. There's a link, A7S III. Just go and register for the event. Okay, next, what I want to share with you is promos and discounts. Yes, promos and discounts. If you are right now in the market to buy anything Sony, don't do anything until you go to this website. It's called cashbacks.co.za. Okay, basically what this means is you can get 10% off your entire Sony purchase. Now, there are a few exclusions on, like, I think the really long lenses, and the A7S III is currently at a special promotional price, so there's no promo on that. But everything else is 10% off. So if you're buying a body and 3 lenses, that's a lot of money that you can save. Now, in order to claim this cash back, you need to use this promotional code. So just go to the Cashbacks website. There's a live stream button. Click type in Jacques11, that's my promo code, and you've got yourself a 10% discount. So what happens is you buy your camera at the retailer, online or in the shop, and then you go to the site afterwards. Now, all the retailers, if you can buy a Sony camera or a lens in a shop, that retailer will be able to get a cashback, because those are all official retailers. If a camera store has a Sony body or has anything Sony, they are official retailers, and you will be able to claim that cashback. So that's just something cool. If you're on the market, don't miss out this promo. Use my promo code. Okay, now I do want to elaborate again about the Q&A. In the YouTube comments and also in the Alpha Universe, there's a question box. I want you guys to ask questions. I want you to ask it while I'm speaking. If you ask it on YouTube, I'll try and respond to it while it's happening, while it's going live. This is the first time I'm trying it like this, so let's see what's happening. So in the meantime, if you want to, leave a comment and we'll see how that looks. But we want you guys to engage. So ask a question right there on the spot, but don't just go. We're going to do a proper Q&A in the end, and I'm going to answer as many questions as possible. Okay, so what are we talking about tonight? First, before I do that, there are some of you sitting here in front of your computer now. You don't know who I am. Who is Jacques? What is Jacques doing? So I'm not going to talk about me tonight. I will keep it short. I am a videographer and I do some photography. I've been shooting with Sony for the past 6 years. It started only with video, and then I discovered the amazing abilities of shooting hybrid. I started shooting some photos and I posted on Instagram, and my Instagram just blew up because of the photos that I was sharing. And because of the photos, I was able to grow and just meet a lot of people, travel the world and stuff like that. So I specialize in videos, but travel, tourism, and adventure films. That's what I do for a living. So that's it about me. If you want to know more, come check out my Instagram. But also, if you're not yet following the Sony A7SIII account, go check that account out. There's a lot of cool things happening in there in the future. So come leave a comment, come say hi, and let's build a community. Okay. We are talking about color grading your A7S III S-Log footage, okay? But I'm not going to start there, okay? We're going to talk about S-Log in general, okay? First of all, why S-Log? Okay, why would you shoot S-Log? Why would you shoot S-Log if a picture profile is going to give you a similar image? Now, I've been a promoter of shooting in a picture profile and not in S-Log for a long time. The main reason why was two reasons. On all the alpha models up until now, there were a few challenges. Okay, we can quickly talk to that challenges. Shooting was difficult because to get your exposure right, getting your white balance right was really tricky. Okay, there's various reasons for that, but you had to overexpose in order to not get noise in the shadows, and that was really tricky because now you can't really judge your exposure with your eye. Even with the histogram, sometimes it's off. It was a difficult process, and bringing that into post was even more. It was just a mission to grade, okay, because of the S-Log noise and 8-bit. 8-bit's the main reason why I avoided S-Log for so long, okay. But in the meantime, I've learned a few things. So I do want to say to you, if you don't have an A7S III that shoots 10-bit, you have an A7 Mark III, A7R III, A7S II, you can still shoot S-Log. You just need to stick to a few rules. Okay, now first of all, why S-Log? Okay, dynamic range can be the difference between cinematic and the consumer look. Now I've seen this over and over and over again. The thing that I look for in a camera the most, the first thing that I look for is dynamic range. Long before I look at resolution and frame rates and all that, the first thing I look for in a camera is dynamic range. Because if you look at cinema, the main reason the stuff looks cinematic is, first of all, it's shot on cinema cameras that have a high dynamic range. And secondly, it's really well lit. And those are the main reasons why it looks cinematic. It's lighting that is really well lit. Even if it's moody, it's still well lit. So light and dynamic range is what's going to give your image that cinematic look, and it's what's going to distinguish it from just a consumer or just the average video, the difference between that. And S-Log is your best way to get there, okay? A fully accurately graded S-Log image has a much bigger range than one that wasn't shot on S-Log. And I've struggled for a long time to shoot on the alpha cameras with S-Log because of the 8-bit limitations and not knowing how to always correctly expose. But I've managed to find a way to shoot with that. And the main thing that I want to say, if you don't, before I start talking about the A7S III, if you have an A7 III, A7S II, A7R, like anything above that, that's still 8-bit. The main secret to shooting S-Log is that you have to shoot either in 4K. I don't recommend shooting in slow motion. The only time you can shoot in slow motion is if your scene is really well lit. Okay, and I'm saying you can't do backlight. Don't shoot backlight. Your scene has to be, so shooting with the sun, brilliant. Don't shoot into the sun, not if you're on 8-bit. Your camera codec can't handle that amount of grading in post because you'll see artifacts and stuff like that. But if you're shooting with the sun or your scene is well lit with lights, I've got a light on me right here. My laptop is illuminating my face. Then it's fine, you can shoot that, but still 4K handles the S-Log a lot better because the bitrate's higher, there's more detail. If you downscale it, it's just better. So main thing is just shoot 4K and make sure your scene is well lit. So I've shot S-Log on scenes where I needed that dynamic range and I wanted to put in that extra effort in grading. And then the most important thing is you have to overexpose 2 stops. That is still a thing with the new A7S III. That's where we're getting next. You don't have to do that anymore, but you need to expose 2 stops over. And you can see that on your light meter, or you can just go literally 2 stops by doubling your ISO or your aperture. Okay, so next what we're doing is the old way. We discussed this. Difficult to shoot, you couldn't see the exposure well, the white balance sometimes because it's so flat you don't see the white balance. Let's talk about the new way. Okay, S-Log 3 on the A7S III. Guys, I've spent some time with this camera and it is incredible. I'm not kidding when it's a game changer. It's truly in a class of its own. It's a small lightweight body throwing punches in a heavyweight ring of cinema. It's cinema level packed in a body. And I have had so much fun shooting with this camera, especially when it came to log. So I've only shot S-Log on the A7S III because it's such an absolute pleasure to shoot with it. And it's easier to shoot, easier to grade. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to first talk about exposure and white balance. And just when you're shooting S-Log with the A7S III, what's new? So I'm just shooting in a standard S-Log 3, S-Gamma 3. You get a few different options like the .Cine, but it's more or less the same. The important thing comes in with the gamma assist. Okay, this has been in previous models also, but I feel like Sony finally nailed it in the A7S III. The gamma assist is like, there you see your flat image on your camera. You don't always want to stare at a flat image. With the A7S III, you don't have to. You literally just press a button. I bound it as a shortcut button, so it's instant, on, off, on, off. As you can see, I can go back, on, off. You can see all that color and detail coming back. And that's giving you almost a final image. When I say a final image, when you add a LUT, 100% LUT, that is more or less what it's going to look like. Which brings me to my next point. When it comes to processing the footage, grading the footage, it actually is really important the kind of LUTs that you put on your footage and how you process that. A lot of people just grab a LUT from the internet. Any of their favorite YouTubers, they grab a LUT, they chuck it on there, and they don't understand why their footage is not working. Because those LUTs weren't all designed for the same cameras. Okay. Now I've got exciting news, especially with the A7S III. There's some really cool LUTs and it's free and it's by Sony. Okay, so if you go, let's talk about the grading process. If you go, I'm going to show you an example before, after. This is in my No Limits film, by the way. If you haven't seen it, go check it on YouTube. Type in Sony A7S III No Limits Jacques Crafford. It's the video that I shot pre-launch with the A7S III, and it was just absolutely, just the dynamic range just blew my mind. So if you go to the Sony website, it's the pro.sony website, okay, you will see there's an option for Sony LUTs. Just, you can Google it, Sony LUTs Pro website. Those LUTs were specifically designed with the Sony's color profile in mind, okay. You need to go and download those. There's some third-party LUTs also, they're all free, okay. But the Sony LUTs is your starting LUT, it's your starting point. And I've tested this, I've tested a bunch of LUTs, and the best way to start, the best way to get the best skin tones, the best out of your camera, is to use the Pro LUTs provided by Sony. Okay, so go and download that. when I got the A7S III, I was nervous because I didn't know the camera, how it works. And I read up that these LUTs perform super well on the FX9 and the Venice systems, which obviously are the high-end cinema cameras. So I downloaded these LUTs and I filmed a few clips on the plane on the way to Cape Town. And I put this LUT on and it was incredible. The skin tones were mind-blowing. I was like, wow, out of the box, this is really crazy. So what I'm going to share with you now is just how little grading I had to actually do. If my exposure was correct and my LUT was applied, I did very little grading. Okay, I'm going to do a few more advanced examples tonight, but just to show you how little you have to do to get a very cinematic image. Okay, so first of all, we're going to talk about this image here. It's a before and after, so that's very flat. That's what it looks like when you shoot S-Log. Something to note about the one button, I call it the one button gamma display, gamma assist, is that you can actually review your footage with this LUT applied over. So it doesn't actually come out like that. It's still the raw log, not the raw, but the untouched, ungraded log image. But you can review it in your camera by putting on the gamma display assist. So when that is on, you can actually play it back and you see what it's going to look like with that LUT applied that we just mentioned now. And that is really cool for, you know, sometimes a client comes over your shoulder or they want to review the shot with you and you want to show them the shot, but it's super flat and they're like, oh, what's that? It's not just for, it's for you. It's for you. It's so that you can see, wow, this is pretty much what I'm getting. Now, I want to say this. Having shot with the A7S III, okay, what I saw when I switched on the gamma assist and what I saw in post after applying that LUT was exactly the same picture. Okay, this is where the fun starts. Okay, so when you shoot with the A7S III, you expose with your eyes. I don't even trust a histogram anymore because the screen is so good. And the EVF is so good. I hold it, especially if I'm shooting in bright sunlight, I hold the EVF. It's got the highest resolution EVF in the world. It's like having a 4K monitor in your eye. You can hold that up there, and I trust my eye. I didn't make any mistakes with my eye. So you can just hold it up, and you get that exposure with the LUT applied, and you get into post. And if you missed it with a bit, you can still bring it up or bring it down because that's how amazing S-Log is. Okay, so we've got a before and after, and I'm just going to quickly run through how I got this image to look this way. It's very simple. So like I mentioned, you download the Sony LUT. This is the S-Log 3 to Rec 709 LUT. There's a bunch. Okay, there's S-Log 2, there's a whole bunch, but the one I was using is S-Log 3 to Rec 709. Okay, so I'm going to show you in Premiere, but it's pretty much going to be the same in Final Cut or any other NLE. If you're using DaVinci, I'm thinking of moving over to DaVinci. It looks like a really powerful platform. If you guys have any comments about that, leave a comment in the description. I would love to know what you edit on, what you grade on. I'm on Premiere, but I'm really ready to move over to DaVinci because of the absolute power you get in grading. So first of all, we're going to apply our LUT. Now, I don't do input LUTs, because that 100% bakes in the LUT at 100%. I don't want that. I always want to have control. So I would rather add a creative LUT and choose the strength on what it must be. And then if I need to add another LUT, a finishing LUT, anything like that, I can do that on top. But I'm not going to use the input LUT. So I'm not going to go to basic and choose an input LUT. I'm actually going to creative looks. So the first thing is to add the LUT. So it's called the S-Gamma 3 S-Cine Log 3 to LC Rec 709. As you can see, there's a major improvement in the image. Something that's throwing me off is the tint. It's a bit of too much on the green side. The reason for this is because I was shooting with the ND filter. I was shooting outside and I wanted to stick to the shutter rule. So the tint was a bit too much on the green side, which I quickly corrected, easy. That is amazing about the 10-bit codec. You can really push the tint and the white balance much further than with the 8-bit cameras, and especially also because of the 422 color. So now, just before I show you that, I want to talk about the intensity. Right now, you can see in this example, the intensity is at 100%, okay? 95% of my videos that I used in this No Limits film, I applied the starting LUT on 100%, okay? On 100% because it looks that good. The only time I would make it less, which is why I said I want to have the freedom, is in a shot like this where it's high contrast. I'll go through another example also, but some high contrast shots where there's a lot of sun and really dark scenes. Like I had to boost the shadows a bit in this scene. As you can see in the corner over there where the sun comes up, it's so soft, and the dynamic range is just beautiful. And I'm shooting into the sun, and just look at all the detail in the model behind and the front. You can just, I didn't even use a reflector here, so that's just to show the dynamic range. But in a case like this where I don't want to blow out the highlights too much, I bring down the intensity just a little bit, and then I play with the finer controls. But getting back to my previous example, I'm on 100%. I can see the tint is a little bit green, so I'm going to basic corrections to fix that. Okay, now I want to just share with you my workflow when I'm doing grading. I always start with a LUT. Okay, so you apply the LUT, then I do curves. The only time I jump the curves is if there is a white balance or a tint issue. Okay, if the tint is off or the white balance is off and I see it immediately, I fix that first, then I go to my curves. In this example, I made a few minor adjustments in a basic correction, but I usually do this afterwards. Okay, because I prefer to work with curves. It's the most powerful grading tool. You can do everything in curves if you know what you're doing. So yeah, just fix the tint. You can see the before and after there, just a green going more natural look. Next, I applied my curves. So there's a lot of different ways to play with your curves. I have a go-to. I usually try and boost my mids above the line, just the mids in midtones. In this case, because it was a sunny shot and quite bright, I even had to bring down the exposure just a notch. I had to just above the line, but sometimes I push it up above. I don't do the traditional S, and I always crush the blacks, and then I try to level out the highlights. I don't actually boost the highlights. I like the more softer look. Okay, so after having applied my LUT, I fixed my tint, my white balance, I did my curves. Now the next thing you can see it that makes this image different from the before and after is the greens. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this a lot. I'm going to talk about the HSL qualifier. In Premiere it's called HSL secondary, but in general speaking terms it's referred to as an HSL qualifier. Now an HSL qualifier I use pretty much in every single clip that I color grade. I like to call it selective color grading. That is where you color pick one specific color, you isolate it. We can quickly go there. You can see I isolated all the greens here. You isolate that color based on the sliders. It's use, saturation, and luminance. Based on those three, you can qualify and select one color and then edit that color individually. And you've got multiple options here. You can change the tint, you can bring it the temperature down, you can boost the saturation, bring it down. You can even boost the luminance, which is something I do a lot, especially on skin tones. If there's a bit of a color cast and I wasn't able to get it out in camera, I just go and qualify the skin tones, boost the luminance, and it's solved and it looks amazing. So that's one of my go-tos. So I do this on every single clip. And what I want to add about this, what makes this so great about the A7S III is now you've got the 422 color. A lot of people don't know what 422 means. It is essentially keying. It means that there's less color being shared by pixels. So there's actually more color per square pixels. So that means when you select a color with your qualifying tool, your keying tool, like chroma keying, if you're doing green screen work, there's more color to choose from. So you're actually getting less pixelation, less halos. Like you guys know the halo effect. If you blur it, you get that ugly halo. You get a more accurate selection of your colors. And this is why I love 422. That is what sets 420 far apart, is when I do this. And I do this all the time. I HSL qualify all my footage. There's always a color that I want to bring down. And then what I'll do is I'll add another lumetri look on it, and I'll bring that color up, and I'll make like the greens down, and I'll bring up the reds or whatever. So it's completely up to your creative preference. But as you can see, I selected the green over here, and basically if you look at the before and after, I just desaturated the greens. So this is the before, that's the after. You can see I brought down the luminance in the red box. You can see I brought down the luminance, and I brought down the saturation to 80. And I even made it a little bit green. I even made it colder. So your green channel is one of your most important channels when you're grading. And I found most all cinema, movies, commercials, they all desaturate the greens. I'm not saying that we must do it, you must do it, but it does have a look. It's similar to the orange and teal look. When you do it right, it works. It's just your eyes, it's pleasing to look at. So desaturated greens always looks nice. So it's nice to just select that one color without altering the rest of the image. You can still get a vibrant image, but you're desaturating your greens. And this is what I love. And this is all the grading that I did. I didn't use any other LUTs. I didn't play with the color tones or the color wheels. I just applied the LUT. I fixed the tint. I put on a curve and I desaturated the greens, and that's how you get this image. The rest, the camera does it for you. It's the dynamic range. It looks just that cinematic. Okay, so next up what we're going to do is I did a recap. How I grade, my grading process, apply the LUT, minor corrections, white balance, and then I start with the curves and then the basic corrections. So basic corrections I always do afterwards, like bringing down highlights, boosting shadows. I'm going to share a little bit more about how I do that now. And then the HSL qualifier. And then finally, if I really want to, I play with the color wheels to, like, for example, in my shadows, put a blue tint or like the orange and teal, whatever you want to do, that happens last. Okay, that's if you want to go a bit more creative. Okay, now, first, what I want to talk about is gradient masks. Okay, this is something that I haven't used too much until I got the A7S III. It wasn't really something that I focused on, but now it becomes really important. So what is a gradient mask? Let's just quickly look at this image. This is the before image of one of the highest contrast scenes that you can shoot. The sun is coming up. It's straight into the camera. There's virtually no light coming from the behind, so it's really dark. Okay. If you look at the after, you'll see what happens. There's a clear drop in the highlights in the sky, and there's a boost in the shadows. Okay. Now this I did not with the basic correction. Okay. If you can and it works, sure thing. But a contrast scene like this, or a really harsh, difficult, contrasty scene like this, you have to work with gradient masks. Okay. Now what makes this so incredible is you basically identify a part of the scene. If you can look at the first example, I just masked the top of the frame, which is the highlights, and I dropped the highlights -50. Okay. You'll see I put a feather on there. And because I want to do the opposite with the other side, I don't have to go and draw a new mask. I can copy this effect. So the sky I brought down, -50 highlights. This scene wasn't moving around. It was a static shot, so it's super easy. You don't have to keyframe the mask. We can talk about that. In some scenes, it becomes really complex. In my No Limits film, there were 2 scenes where I had to mask, where the mask is moving with the frame because the sky is moving. But it's incredible how you can maximize on your dynamic range. It's already good, but now you can make it that much better. So it's like you're not using the full potential of the camera because the detail is there, the information is there. You use a mask, bring down the highlights and boost the shadows. So when you copy this mask, the one I used to bring down the highlights, you paste it on a layer, you put a new layer on top, and you invert it. That means the opposite of the frame is going to be adjusted. That's what I did here. You'll see I inverted. I just put a bit of more of a feather on there. You can see that I dropped the blacks, I pushed the shadows, and I actually bumped up the exposure a bit. So that is something where you can really see the potential of just using a mask. You're actually bringing out that foreground, bringing out that background without getting an overall faded image. You're still getting that punchy, contrasty scene with all that detail in the shadows and its soft highlights. Okay, so before I carry on, I want to just mention again about this cashback promotion. If you haven't heard about it, if you're in the market to buy a Sony camera, go to www.cashbacks.co.za. There's a lot of promotions on there, but the live stream promotion, that's where you want to go. Use my promo code JACQ11 and you get 10% off your next Sony purchase. There's a few exclusions. I think on the bigger lenses, it's the Sony FE 400mm, the 600mm, those are the big lenses, and then the new 20mm 1.8. Apart from that, everything you buy, if you buy 200k worth of gear, you're going to get 20,000 off. So that is how much you will save if you use my promo code and you buy. And how it works is you go to your retailer, whether you go in store or whether you go on the website, you click, you buy, you order, and then you just take that receipt and you apply on the cashback website. And if you were able to buy it in South Africa, locally, on any site, or it's going to be legit, it's going to be valid. It takes a few days to refund you, but this is a really cool initiative by Sony. Okay, now what we're going to do next is we spoke about just applying the LUT, getting the curves, and then I mentioned about putting the gradients on. Now we're going to combine that with the HSL qualifier, because this was quite a tricky scene. So this is the before. As you can see, there's quite a lot changing in the seed. This is the before. This is just after the LUT is applied. And if you see the after, you'll see there's a major difference, especially in the highlights and also in the darker parts of the image. Okay, so this is quite with previous cameras, this shot would have been unusable. I would have not used this shot because the highlights in the peaks would have been blown out and it would have been too dark in the shadows. Okay, so just to explain, the first thing I did is I applied the LUT so it looked like that, and then like I mentioned earlier, I just go do that correction. So I fixed the white balance and the tint. Massive difference already, you can see the difference. Just fixing the white balance, and now you've got all that room to play with. Okay, so you can fix it to a much larger extent than previously. And then the next step is to boost the shadows. Now it doesn't look like much, but I don't want my image to have that super HDR look, so you can boost it a lot more. I just boosted mine just to have that subtle. You still want your shadows to feel a little bit darker and shadowy, and don't have that super dynamic range, because you can go too dynamic in a sense, if I can say it like that. I boosted my shadows, and then lastly I dropped down my highlights. Okay, now I did way more than just put on a gradient. I put on two gradients, again, one at the top and one at the bottom, an inverted gradient. I boosted the shadows at the bottom gradient, and the top gradient I brought down the highlights. But then I took it a step further and I qualified HSL secondary tool in Premiere. You can see that area over there. I selected the thing, I selected the color. You just play around with it until you fine tune it. With the 422 is now much easier. You're getting a more accurate selection of that color. And essentially there you can see that's the color I selected with the HSL tool. And what I did is I boosted the saturation because it was a bit flat, like the sunlight hitting the peaks there, it wasn't matching with all the vibrant greens that you're getting in this image. I boosted the saturation, and if you look next to the color wheel under correction, I brought down the luminance, and that is essentially the highlights. So I brought down the highlights, and now when you look at this image, it's way more natural. So this image is a combination of all three of the things I discussed. You add your LUT, you do your correction, then you do the gradient. And same thing with this, I had to mask it just a little bit because it was a moving image. You can keyframe it, and then you can play with your HSL qualifier. And that is how I grade all my images. So S-Log 3 is easy. You don't have to struggle with it anymore. Like I said, shooting is super easy. You switch your gamma assist on, and it's like shooting on a normal picture profile. It's really easy to judge your exposure with your eye, especially with the viewfinder. Okay, so that's it. So now we're going to take questions. I'm going to take my phone up in here. I don't see any YouTube comments yet, so I will just quickly open it on here. You guys just give me a moment. I'm going to open it up on here. I've got it up on my phone, and I'm going to try my best to answer your questions. Okay, let's see, refresh. Let's refresh this. Give it a second. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions yet. So I'm just going to give it a moment. In the meantime, if you are joining us on YouTube, you can feel free to drop a comment. I would love to see that. Cool. So what I'm going to do now is just, again, thank you guys. Don't forget your promo code. If you want to buy, it's Jacques11. If you have any questions about how this works, come and give us a shout. Come to the Sony Alpha SA account. The best would be to come to my account at Jacques_Crafford and come and ask me, and I will try and find you the best possible discount to make sure that you're not doing anything wrong. Okay, so we're going to wait another minute for questions. If there aren't any questions, I'm going to address something that's about the A7S III. That's probably the best. Yeah, let's do that while we wait for questions. So guys, there's a lot of videos on YouTube about the S3. I would really encourage you to go watch Gerald Undone, go and watch Philip Bloom. He did a 2-hour review about this camera. It's incredible. He just got his camera and he's sharing some mind-blowing stuff on there. And something that we all discovered while we were shooting with the S3, especially in S-Log, is the dual native ISO. Now, if you don't know what a dual native ISO is, first I probably should have mentioned that from the start. When you shoot S-Log, you have to shoot at the native ISO of the camera. Because if you're not shooting at the native ISO, you're not getting that maximum dynamic range. If you're shooting a higher or lower, some cameras don't allow you to go lower than the base ISO. The S3 actually allows you to go lower. So if you don't have an ND filter and you need to go down a little bit lower than 640, you can go all the way to 160. But if you go higher, the higher you go with your ISO, the more your dynamic range starts degrading, because the camera was designed to function at a base ISO. And this A7S III is at 640. Most of the other alpha models are at 800 or at 1600, depending on the camera you have. But that being said, when you shoot outdoors, you got to use an ND filter, and you got to play with your variable ND filter to stick to that dynamic, that base ISO that's going to give you that dynamic range. It's super, super important. So I've done this with the A7S III. Actually, I shot on 800 because I thought in the beginning it was an 800. But now, after my second shoot, if you come to tomorrow's launch, come online, check that out. Like, we shot everything at 640, and I can actually see a small difference. So what I want to say is the dual base ISO at 16,000 ISO on A7S III, it's like shooting at 640 ISO. The dynamic range is 100% good, and you've got no noise. And then you slowly start to see noise because it's S-Log right up until 12,800, and the moment you switch to 16,000, it just eliminates all the noise, and you're getting this super dynamic range. They tested this, and I've used a few shots in my video where I actually shot at 16,000 ISO, and apart from a little bit noise in the shadows where it was really dark, especially in well lit scenes, you did not see the noise, and that is incredible. For example, when you shoot with the probe lens, that Laowa macro probe lens, that's a f16, f17, you need so much light when shooting with that, so you can bump up the ISO, and that's what I did. So that's just something amazing to know and think about S-Log on the A7S III. I'm just going to check for another question if I don't see anything. Okay, here's a question. Let's see. I've got a question from... sorry, I'm just reading. Jason Baldwin is watching. Jason, thank you so much. He's just saying thank you for the awesome presentation. Thank you so much, dude. And then there's a question from Visuals by Brandon. He's saying, when is the A7S III shipping in South Africa? Honestly, I don't know. I'm not 100% sure, but tomorrow all these questions will be addressed, because the actual guys from Sony, the head of Sony South Africa, will address these questions. So I can't speak on their behalf, but come to tomorrow's launch event and we will answer all those questions. There's one more question, because I got a question from Brandon also. Do I need to CF fast type for the V90 cards work for the 4K 120? That's also a question I'm not 100% sure yet, because I've only shot with a brand new CF Express cards. Sorry about that. We will be able to answer that tomorrow as well. So come to tomorrow's launch event and we'll answer all these questions by the tech guys. They know everything. But Sony only gave me the brand new CF Tough cards, the 160 gig cards. Those are amazing, by the way, and I only use those. So I haven't tested it out on the normal SD cards. So that's it from me, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any more questions, please come say hi on the Sony Alpha SA account. Come say hi on my Instagram account, and also come check out tomorrow night's launch event on the Sony Alpha 7S III. It's going to be amazing. Wish you guys all the best with the rest of your week, and have a great night. Cheers. Take care.